Hello, and welcome to another episode of This Week in San Diego Soccer History. I'm John Cross, along with Dylan Wilson. And Dylan, how are you doing this evening?
I am doing all right. Not soccer related, but unfortunately, this week I found out that San Diego Mojo will not be continuing operations next year, which is a bit very disappointing. As I really enjoyed that a lot. I like volleyball, but I enjoyed it even more than I expected to. It was really the first time I felt like excited about a sports team, like really.
Oh, looks like we lost Dylan momentarily there. I'm going to go ahead and jump in till we get Dylan back. But uh, to go along with his comments about San Diego Mojo, I also saw that, and it looks like their last home game is going to be, at least as we're recording this, on Thursday evening. Dylan, do we have you back?
Yes, I think if you can hear me, I'm having some camera troubles, but if you can hear me,
Okay.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, let's
Yeah, I
go
was
ahead
just
with audio.
saying I felt I felt very excited and connected to the team in a way that I hadn't really since Loyal. So that was, and I guess it did end up ending, in a similar fashion. So that's unfortunate. But yeah, it was I kind of had a feeling this was coming. I'd heard some rumors. I don't totally know what happened like behind the scenes. There's a lot of, I don't know, stories that aren't necessarily conflicting, but have different details. So I still don't really know. But it's disappointing. They did have like a season ticket member meet and greet with the players last night, which was a lot of fun. I really wish my camera was working so I could pull up the hat I got signed by a bunch of the players. But maybe
Ah,
later in the
that's
show if
nice.
my camera starts working. Yeah, but they were all very sweet. It was really nice to chat with them. And so it was just kind of a, it was weird. Like that was announced yesterday, and then we also had this like season ticket member thing last night. So yeah, I don't know, kind of a bummer, but it was. I'm glad that I did that, and so like if they do end up coming back in the future, with it sounds like is their aim, though I don't obviously know to what degree that will be a reality. I hope people come out and support because it was a lot of fun and it's cool. I think sometimes we kind of forget in America that there are sports outside of like the big five, I guess, if you include soccer these days. But these people are very real, making a living doing this, and they deserve our support as much as any other pro athletes.
Yeah, I think that goes back to what we talk about frequently on this podcast and some of the other podcasts you and I have done together is that idea of community and connecting with your community and having those teams. Um, which really, I think it means a lot when you're able to get in there and meet the players, and that there's a level of comfort and connection a lot of times with the I will use the phrase lesser sports just in terms of money and wealth that goes on compared to your super high paid athletes. So that's always, I think, a benefit of finding a good local team to support, and sometimes in some of those sports that are not at the top echelon um, in terms of run by wealthy billionaire investors, which is becoming more and more frustrating to follow, especially if
Absolutely.
we bring it back to soccer and say in terms of something like the Vancouver Whitecaps right now and
Yes.
everything that they're
God, what a
going through.
tragedy.
So, yeah. And I doubt, I mean, we won't spend too much time on this, but I doubt the Vancouver Whitecap story, I highly doubt will end up the same way as the Save the Crew story. So,
Yeah, it does not
well,
seem that it's trending that direction, does it? So, yeah.
no, because I don't think the fans and stuff have the same kind of leverage. I think some people forget with Save the Crew that while it was a big fan push, there were some laws on the books in the
Hmm.
state of Ohio due to them already losing a team, the Cleveland Browns, the first time around, um, that helped cause some delays and allow the whole Save the Crew movement to really have some time to get some backing behind it. Um, and that was a unique case to Ohio that I don't think in most states would be the same. And I really, unfortunately, I think it's going to be a sad state. And MLS. If the Vancouver Whitecaps, if they just pick up the franchise and move it somewhere, I doubt they will keep the
Vegas.
name. Right. I mean, that's what all the rumors are. But um, as you know, so when we look through our history here in San Diego, we have lots of teams that have moved to us, have moved away from us in soccer and in other sports. And it is, I think, one of the tragedies of professional sports in the United States, the way we choose to handle professional sports. And that's
It is
a
always
theme I think we will come back and forth to a lot in our San Diego soccer history.
it is always refreshing, especially like English people, but really people from other countries in general. When you talk about the way American sports teams will just up and move cities, the way they are flabbergasted by the even mere concept of that, like, is really refreshing,
Right.
And I did just want to take this moment. I seemed while my camera's still working. This was the hat I was referring to. So it's nice to get a bunch of
Oh, all right.
signatures from the players and stuff. Yeah.
That is nice.
Anyway, yeah, it was good. But yeah, it's I've been thinking a lot lately about like how can I get out and kind of support the more local sports, whatever the sport be, really, because I'm pretty tired of the whole like monetized everything. And maybe this is a topic for another episode, and we're really getting on the tangent here. But this is the whole underpinning idea behind FC United of Manchester, which I think is still a bit of a silly name, but the concept is beautiful. And so, like, there's something to that. I hope maybe America can get that sorted out. But anyway, just to round off the MLS thing, what frustrates me the most, though, is the way fans in cities that have lost teams will still go to bat for the owners, like, of other franchises.
Yeah.
And it's like, it just, I don't know. I guess really that says something larger about our society, that we can't like empathize with each other that way. But yeah, I don't know. And that's, the Whitecaps will be not just across city lines, but country lines as well. So that's going to be very sticky and gross and not fun.
Well, we will certainly dive into this topic a bit more when we start talking about the 1968 San Diego Toros. And we start getting into that series here in a few weeks. We'll do our first episode because part of that is looking at the background of how the NASL formed in the first place and kind of the history of what happened in the 60s. And I think it really highlights the state of American sports that we're still in, but how they function and how they work and what is a professional league. Not in terms of how we discuss it with soccer, what's Division 1 and Division 2 and Division 3, but just how the owners of sports teams use sports and want to use sports in terms of either avoiding taxes or some kind of tax haven a little bit, or as a to generate value. You lose a little money over time, but you generate more value, and then you hopefully sell it when you do for a profit. But all those things will come into play when we really look at how our modern era of soccer in these last 50 years started back up again with the NASL. So we're going to have some time to really dig into that a little better and see how not much has changed since the 1960s and the proliferation of all our professional sports around that time. But tonight, we're going to have a very heavy soccer's themed episode. We really only have two big things that we're talking about. We'll look at San Diego Soccer's just won their 17th championship. So we'll talk about that a little bit here in a second. But our big story tonight is going to be on Kevin Crowe. We'll kind of do a walk back through memory lane with his career, especially because this Friday, May 1st, he will be formally inducted into the National Soccer Hall of Fame. So we'll be looking at his story quite a bit. That'll be the bulk of our time in this episode. Before we jump into any of that, let's look at last week's trivia question. And I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get it pulled up here on the screen for us. And last week's question, again, and talking about Kevin Crowe being formally inducted into the National Soccer Hall of Fame, there have been 5 previous members of the Sockers that have been inducted into the National Soccer Hall of Fame. And our question was, can you name all 5? So last week, you did jump in with one, and that was Landon Donovan, which is one of the correct answers. I had some people actually at the Sockers match actually offer up some different names. So we'll throw out some of those names here in a second. We also had 619 Blade Guy on YouTube actually formally put something in our community section on our YouTube channel. So thank you very much for that, and offered up 4 names. One of those names is correct. So Dylan, I'm gonna leave you to have a little guess if you can see which one is correct of the 4 he offered, because he did offer Landon Donovan. We've already done that. But the other 3 he offered up were Julie V, Kaz Dana, and Steve Jungle.
Well, I think Julie V was a good guess based on what I've learned in the process of doing this podcast, but it does not appear that that is a correct answer, though one might question why not. But whatever, that's another topic for another time. Steve Zungel, best guess, Zungel, yes. Is correct. 2023 was inducted, so fairly recently.
Steve Jungle got inducted the same year as Landon Donovan in the class of 2023.
Sorry, I'm just curious what the
Steve
etymology
Jungle,
of that name.
For all the people out there who are old like me and remember Steve Jungle playing, his nickname was the Lord of All Indoors. So he's quite the prolific goal scorer in both the NASL indoor and the MISL.
So I was gonna say when you said Jungle, my antenna went off because like that sounds Balkan. I looked it up. His full name is Slaviša Jungle, born in the People's Republic of Serbia in the Federal People's Republic of Yugoslavia in 1954, and actually played for Hajduk Split for 6 years, which I have mentioned several times on this podcast before. Where he began his career. So, sorry, go ahead.
We'll
I just wanted to add that. I thought that was interesting.
He has a very interesting story in how he got to the U.S. and we're not going to spend time on that today, but that's a story for another time. Or if you have a chance to go look it up online.
A story that combines San Diego and Split, Croatia. I'm on board.
Yeah. So the other 2, Julie V and Kaz Dana, are incorrect in terms of the National Soccer Hall of Fame. We'll do a profile a little bit later of people who've made it into the Indoor Soccer Hall of Fame, but that's not for this podcast as well. Those are some we're saving up for another time. But the 3 other members, and I did have someone at the Sockers match when I was talking to him offered up one of them, and it was the correct answer, and that would be Ron Newman,
I cannot believe
coach.
I didn't think of that. That is like the most obvious. The trophy's literally named for the guy.
It is. So Ron Newman is one of them. So that's the 3rd one. The other 2, again, I think if you are closer to my age and watch the Sockers over time and then follow these players' careers over time as well, they would not be surprising. But Hugo Perez was inducted with the class of 2008, and then Fernando Clavillo with the class of 2005. They both had U.S. men's national team experience. In addition to the Sockers, and Hugo Perez played outside of the country as well. He wasn't just a player here in the U.S. But those are your 5. So, I mean, Kevin Crowe is the newest inductee, but Landon Donovan, Steve Jungle, Hugo Perez, Fernando Clavillo, and Ron Newman make up the 6 people from the San Diego Sockers organization or have some kind of connection to the San Diego Sockers organization that have been elected into our National Soccer Hall of Fame. All right, and let's we'll move ahead to birthdays this week, and since we're keeping it on a Sockers theme, I'm only going to highlight 2 birthdays, and they are both former Sockers players. The first one had a birthday just this last Monday, and that's Gene Wilrich, who was also a part of those great early San Diego Sockers teams, especially that first run of 5 championships that they had. And then a person who came to play a little bit later with the Sockers has a birthday here on Thursday this week, April 30th. That's Nate Hetherington. He was a great local player. Played briefly for the Sockers, played for the Flash, and has been a coach at all kinds of levels and different schools here locally in the county, and still is. But had a brief stint with the San Diego Sockers as well. So happy birthday both to Gene Wilrich on last Monday that we just finished on the 27th, and Nate Hetherington on April 30th. And we did have some other birthdays. Like I said, we're keeping this a heavy San Diego Sockers theme. And to do a quick correction from last week, we did have a question in the middle of the podcast, and we talked about how many times the Sockers have been runners-up. And again, when I was talking with some people, because I went to both the home matches and the championship series for the Sockers, and someone reminded me that there was another one in, I think we did 2001, and then the 24-25 season, and 1993 was also another year they were runners-up. So still quite impressive. Only 3 times that they've been in the finals, that they were runners-up, that they didn't win it. And now with this last weekend, gets us to our first topic here, is the San Diego Sockers are now 17-time champions. They've made it to the finals 20 times. They've won it 17. They won it in the 3rd game of the series against Milwaukee. The 10-3 was the score, but it was basically over by the middle of the second quarter. The Sockers exploded out to a 7-1 lead very quickly in the match, and it was a huge difference from the match on Friday, because I went to that one, and the Sockers had some players suspended because of an altercation from game 1, and it was painful to watch is a little bit of an exaggeration, but it was not the way I've seen the Sockers play a lot. But on Monday, that was a well-oiled machine, and the Sockers just had full control of that match from beginning to end. Sebastian Mendez had a hat trick. The MVP was Leo. Chris Toth he got the goalkeeper of the finals. And it was, I think now for this group, like this reincarnation. So we talked about teams moving, right? We still occasionally, and the San Diego Sockers have been one of these where we keep getting Phoenix versions of them. They've stayed in San Diego. This is the 3rd incarnation of the San Diego Sockers. And for this group that started in 2009, this is their 7th championship. So quite impressive run of form for the San Diego Sockers throughout their history. And it's the first time I'd been out to Front Wave Arena. It's a nice little venue to see an indoor soccer match, an arena soccer match. So I had a lot of fun.
I not strictly soccer related, but just on the topic of the new arena, I saw this week, I guess maybe it was last week, that the PWHL, which I think is the Professional Women's Hockey League, is what it stands for, announced that San Diego was a leader for an expansion. And I have to imagine that new arena is where they're eyeballing, because it's like I said, brand new, got all the facilities, and it's like 8 to 10,000 seats. I think that's exactly the ballpark they're looking for. So.
I'm not even sure it's that. I think it's 7 something.
Well, maybe not then, but that was my immediate thought when I heard about that. That seems like just because. I mean, it could be Pechanga, but nobody wants to go to Pechanga. I don't. Pechanga.
Yeah, it's with the. I mean, who knows what's going to happen with the redevelopment in that area? Things feel like they keep getting tied up in court. But at some point, that is going to be redeveloped. So I hadn't heard the news for the hockey team, but if they are, I would not be surprised if they do play, even maybe to start. Maybe eventually move down to San Diego,
Right.
but I could see them starting up there.
Yeah.
And frankly, if you sell it out, it's a fantastic place.
Mhm.
All the seats are great. You feel like you're right on top of the action. It's a nice place, and I think a much better suited venue for the Soccers.
Yeah. I got to get up there. I've just been lazy about it.
Yeah, I know we're toying with. You talked about you did the tickets for the Mojo. We're actually after this toying with doing season tickets for the Soccers next
Very
year.
cool. Nice.
Just I don't always get out as much as I used to, as we've shared many times on the podcast. Um, but it was nice to get out a couple times. It's relatively close to where I am, and it's might be something to look forward to getting out, and it was fun. And I've hesitated doing some sports fan sitting in other places because I'm so used to being in the supporter section. It just
Mhm.
felt awkward, but um, it was nice. We had some friends that we went with and sat with, and it had a lot of fun in just in the normal seats,
The
not in
normies.
the
Yeah.
the
Sometimes it's fun to
supporter
just sit and
section.
watch a game without having to worry about creating the
Yeah,
atmosphere. Yeah.
but I have to hand it to the brew hosts out there. They did a fantastic job. It was quite packed over in the section. Made lots of noise, active all game. A lot of fun. They brought a lot of great atmosphere.
Well, I will say to you, and also I guess to anybody listening, that if you're thinking about getting season tickets to something like the Soccers, even if you're not sure you're going to go to all the games, I would encourage you to do it. I didn't expect that I would make it to all the Mojo games this season. I have. I remember when I got my season ticket to the A's. I didn't, I remember thinking like, who's going to go to like 80 something baseball games? I went to like 50 baseball games one year. Like just having the ticket is sometimes
Yeah,
all you need to get your butt out there. And with something at the level of the Soccers or Mojo, sometimes it's even if you're not going to make it to every game, like the act of being a part of it that way, like lends necessary support, right? Like even if you're not going to get to every game. So
right.
I would encourage people to, if you're on the fence and you have the money, go for it. I think you might be surprised how much you get out.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. All right, I think it's time before we get into our main topic to look at our kind of mid-episode trivia questions. So let's go ahead and pull that up. All right, so 3 Soccers players were part of the 1984 U.S. men's Olympic soccer team. Can you name all 3 of them? All right, so we will answer that when we get back after our main topic here about Kevin Crowe, but 3 players that were part of the Soccers that played on the 1984 U.S. men's Olympic team, which was held in Los Angeles, right? It was all people you could go see locally if you had tickets to the 84 Olympics here in Southern California. Excuse me. Okay, let's go ahead and get into our main topic of Kevin Crowe, who is, again, if you're my age and you grew up with the Soccers, Kevin Crowe is a name that is synonymous with the Soccers, synonymous with defending. And we're going to do a little bit of a walkthrough. Excuse me, I have a little trouble with my throat here, a little tickle. But doing a bit of a walkthrough of his career and maybe highlight some of those things that are lesser known to people in San Diego, because I think most people are quite familiar with his career with the Soccers, but maybe not so much about some of the things that were outside of the Soccers kind of realm. So we'll go ahead and jump into that. And Dylan, before we start, because I know you grew up in the Bay Area, so you're not steeped in San Diego history. So is Kevin Crowe a name one that you've heard before? And if you had, how much do you know about him at all?
I think Not much, but it is a name I've heard really only in reference to like historic soccer's figures. So I couldn't say I know a whole lot.
Yeah, and he spent, and we'll talk about this in a second, his entire professional career playing with the San Diego Sockers. But let's go ahead and kind of go back to the beginning a little bit. Um, this might be a little more familiar with you. He started playing with Ballistic United Soccer Club out in Pleasanton, which is much closer to your area of growing up than it is down here in San Diego. So up in the, I guess loosely called East Bay. Um, but up in Pleasanton, he went to Amador Valley High School, where he was a standout soccer player, both at the club and at the high school level. I believe one of his coaches at this time period when he was growing up was playing for one of the professional NASL teams in the Bay Area. I don't remember which one exactly, but there was some connection. So I think he had some good coaching based on some of the information that I've read, and some good advice from some good players. But he came down to San Diego State for college, and he was at San Diego State from 1979 to 1982, which is considered really the start of the golden era of SDSU men's soccer, because through the 80s, that's when you have well, at the same time that Kevin Crowe was there, you have Clay Koyman, and then a little later on, you get Eric Winalda and Marcelo Balboa, and you have quite a few players that came through that then made the national team and were part of the resurgence of the U.S. men's national team once they qualified for the 1990 World Cup. So Kevin Crowe was kind of he was in with the group that really kind of that started the beginning of the 80s. That is, again, by a lot of people's metrics, looked at as the golden era for SDSU men's soccer. Also in 87, if I remember correctly, is when the SDSU men's team made it to the College Cup finals, where they lost 2-0 to Clemson. But again, that was a very strong time period for the Aztecs men's soccer. And when we cover the Aztecs men's soccer, which we will do probably in August, do a little more deeper background, I'll have a couple stories to share about that. The personal stories and maybe a little embarrassing stories, but we will share those at that time. So he was there at SDSU. He was part of the defense along with Clay Koyman in 1981, defensive unit that allowed less than a goal a game. 0.9 was their average. I think that might be the best all time with the SDSU men's soccer team, but very, very strong defensive unit that they had with those teams. He would end up graduating with a business degree, which will come into play a little bit later in his life. But he was recognized or on the radar with the Sockers. They end up signing him right out of college, and we'll get to the Sockers career in a second, because also at this time he starts to get on the radar of the national team. And we'll talk about his international career first, because it wasn't until 1990 or the 1990 World Cup that we actually qualified, but we tried and were close some other times. And Kevin Crowe was part of these teams, especially through the early to mid 80s, of these. When we started to turn a corner just before we qualified for the 1990 World Cup. So Kevin Crowe was part of the 1984 Olympic team. So there's one name for your answer for the trivia question. He played, I believe, every minute of all three matches. Started in that 1984 Olympics. He got his first cap a few months before the 84 Olympics in a 0-0 draw with Italy. But in the Olympics, the U.S. men's national team beat Costa Rica 3-0, which frequently had been the Achilles heel. I mean, other than Mexico, but been the Achilles heel for the U.S. team. They would draw Egypt 1-1 and would lose to Italy 1-0 and go out in the group stage, because this is where you only have 16 teams playing in the Olympics, so top 2 teams would advance. But a respectable showing for the US at this 1984 Olympics. In between that and he also played in the 88 Olympics, and again, played all 3 matches. And in the 88 Olympics, there was a 1-1 draw to Argentina, a 0-0 draw to the host, South Korea. And then they lost. It came down with 2 draws. It came down to that last match to see if they would make it out of the group. They did not. They lost 2-4 to the Soviet Union, because yes, the Soviet Union back then in '88, they hadn't broken up yet. And the Soviet Union would go on to be the gold medal champions at that particular Olympics. In the '88 Olympics, the U.S. men's national team ranked 12th out of the 16 teams, but in '84, they were ranked 9th out of the 16 teams. They were basically the best of the teams that got eliminated at the group stage. They were considered the best team that didn't advance. But in between those two, we were trying to qualify for a World Cup, the 1986 World Cup. And again, we'll probably dive into this on another episode later, but there's some very interesting stories around the whole '86 World Cup, how it got moved to Mexico, how Mexico even got to be the host, because United States and Canada were both in the running, and were just effectively dismissed by FIFA. And, Mexico's the only bid they really considered. But because of that, Mexico is granted an automatic berth because they're the host, as we always do with the host countries. CONCACAF only gets 2 spots at this time for the World Cup. So, everybody else is battling it out for that final spot, because Mexico obviously has one of the berths as host. There was a key, and I remember this because this was my senior year in high school. And this is when information you could find a little easier about the men's national team. And I remember this getting close to graduation for me and everything. And I was super excited because I thought there might be a chance that if there were future games, because there were 2 rounds to this qualification, and this was the first round of CONCACAF qualifying, that I might be able to get to one of the games. So I was really hoping for this result, and even toyed with the idea of trying to find a way to get out to Torrance, California, which is where the game was. But the game's on May 31st. Now, Kevin Crowe was playing with the Sockers at this time, and the Sockers had just won their championship for that year, for the 84-85 season. On the 28th was the 7th and final game. They won that match. So 3 days later, Crowe is up with the U.S. men's national team to face Costa Rica in Torrance in a World Cup qualifier. And this, the way everything had played out, this was the last match of this first round. And all the U.S. needed was a tie to advance. And they had just drawn with Costa Rica 5 days earlier away in Costa Rica. So this crazy series of matches, kind of like we do sometimes, our little windows of multiple games, our international windows we do now. Crowe obviously couldn't be at that away match against Costa Rica because he was playing with the Sockers and winning a championship and being named Defender of the Year and all kinds of things. So he makes it to Torrance. And a little interesting is why the match is in Torrance in the first place. I mean, it's convenient for Kevin Crowe and a couple of the Sockers who have just finished their championship and have to make it up for this game. But maybe I'll leave it to you, Dylan. You're playing Costa Rica. Any reason you think the U.S. might host the match in Southern California?
I mean, I have guesses. I don't know. Is there a large diaspora around here? I know the U.S. has done a terrible job of thinking of that before.
Well, I mean, yeah, it comes down to, like it frequently does when we talk about sport, money, right? The
I
U.S.
see.
national team
I
program
totally went
did
the wrong
not,
direction with that. Sorry.
yeah, did did not have a ton of money. They weren't bringing in a ton of money. So when they'd have these World Cup qualifiers, especially in this time, like Torrance hosted quite a few qualifiers. Like Southern California did, especially through this run, and you know they could sell out the. And I forget where they were playing. I think at a junior college or small college there in Torrance, but um, I think it held about 10,000 people. But they could sell it out. They knew that whoever the opponent was that the U.S. was facing, that match was going to sell out. It wouldn't feel like a home match for the U.S. team, but money would be made that would help fund the away trips to go places. But it was definitely a strategic move to put it in Southern California to try to get a full house.
I see.
And they did. And, it was very much a large portion of that crowd. There were a lot of Americans in the crowd, but there were also a lot of support for Costa Rica. Costa Rica would score in the first half in around the 30th minute ish, somewhere in there. And it was a cross that came in where Crow and the attacker went up for it. And if you watch the replay, you can see Crow kind of duck because the keeper came out like he was going to punch it, but the keeper misses it. Crow ducks. The um, the ball gets back into the box, and the Americans try to clear it, but it comes right out to a Costa Rican just inside the top of the box, and he scores from there. And that's the only goal of the game. It knocks the U.S. out of the World Cup. Again, this would be the 9th straight World Cup that the U.S. would miss. And read some articles where Kevin Crowe mentioned that this was one of the most devastating matches that he played because he was happy to play in the Olympics and get that experience. But I think as every soccer player wants is you want to represent your country in the World Cup. And there was for the first time a feeling that this 86 would be the year that the US could qualify because we just had the NASL for almost 15 years. And even though it folded in 84 a year earlier, and most of the players who were playing indoor to have something to keep playing, um, we did actually start to see some benefits from having the NASL around and some more local products and good American products coming up through youth ranks and then colleges that we actually thought this could be the year that they could qualify. We now know they didn't, obviously, and they wouldn't until 1990. But this was a very I remember again being my age and being very into soccer and being a soccer player and having the means to drive and having lots of Southern California connections. Being excited that we could do it and being disappointed and frustrated. I won't say again because I wasn't as heavily invested maybe in 82, but also grew up thinking when I first started watching the World Cup, why is the United States never in a World Cup? But yeah, it was when things were just starting to change. Kevin Crowe also was part of the national team that was prepping for the 1990 World Cup. He played in some of the qualifiers leading up to it. He did not play in that match against Trinidad and Tobago. I don't even think he was called into the team for that one. But a couple of the matches right before that were played, he was a part of. So he had, for the time, and it's not like you get the same number of caps in the 80s as you do now. Like there just weren't that many games. You pretty much played qualifiers and then maybe the Olympics. So he ended up with only about 13, I think it was, total caps for the U.S. men's national team, which technically is not enough to qualify you for the National Soccer Hall of Fame. You need to have at least 20 caps, representing your country. At least that's one pathway into the Hall of Fame. The other pathway is your professional career, and you had to be named to at least one, depending how it's phrased in which league, because they all do things a little differently over time, but like an all-star or a first team recognition. You know, you had to have some kind of recognition that you were very good at your position. And you had to play at least, I think, 5 seasons in whether it's the NASL or the MISL or now Major League Soccer to get in for the player rounds. So let's look at Kevin Crow's soccer's career. And before we do that, do you want to jump in with anything or have any questions, Dylan, before we
No,
move
not
along?
particularly. I'm not anything national team pre '90s is really kind of not something I'm familiar with. So this is like often, as is the case with these topics, it's been a learning process for me as well.
I think this is for most people, because the U.S. wasn't involved, so it wasn't on people's radar until 1990, and then of course we get a new professional league, and I think for a lot of people, 1990 is a start of really being aware of soccer being played in the U.S. So let's look at his soccer's career. As we said, Kevin Crow spent his entire career playing with the Sockers, 14 years. So that was from 1983 to 1996. He made a grand total of 433 appearances with the Soccer, scored 83 goals, had 93 assists. Of those 433 appearances, 118 were playoff appearances, where he had 26 goals and 33 assists. Now, 118 playoff appearances, that is primarily because the MISL in its heyday did 5-game, best of 5 quarterfinals and best of 5 semifinals and then best of 7 finals. And those finals frequently went, the distance. All 5 games are all 7 games. So he had quite a lot of playoff appearances. Crow 5 different times was listed as Defender of the Year. He was an 8-time All-Star. He was a 7-time MISL first team selection. And during his career, the Sockers won 8 indoor titles over his 14 years. In 1985, there were rumors. So this was right after the time the U.S. didn't qualify. So the same time period we're talking about, they got kicked out of the World Cup. And I believe it was that summer specifically, but there were rumors linking Kevin Crow to Manchester United. And it's interesting when you read some of the reports and the articles that Crow didn't seem like he was terribly interested in Manchester United. He was much more interested in Man City. And that was because Kaz Dana, one of his teammates for the Sockers, had played for Manchester City before he came over to the Sockers. And he really talked it up. He really liked Manchester City and is like, if you're going to Manchester, that's where you should play. I don't know if that came into play at all in these conversations, because Ron Atkinson, the manager at the time for Manchester United, did make formal inquiries to the Sockers, contacted the Sockers, but nothing ever came of it. And I always wondered if nothing ever came of it because a player was talking up your rivals. and that's what happened, or something else, which it obviously could have been. But I thought it's funny. One, interesting. I don't know how many people remember it from the time, because they might have missed that. But there was a link of Kevin Crow moving possibly to Manchester United there in the mid '80s, which would have been an interesting story, certainly, and would likely have been one of the first Americans to move over and play over in the Premier League, if he was able to make it onto the first team as well. So that's kind of his career with the Sockers and his background, post playing, Kevin Crowe, he did some stuff in the business world, put his business degree to use locally. He had a business he started. But also, once 2001 rolled around, and if you've listened to our series on the San Diego Spirit, you'll know that he was the general manager of the San Diego Spirit from its inception, and was there at least for a couple of years. And to give a little preview of things we'll talk about on that San Diego Spirit series a little bit later, he eventually does become the chief operating officer of the WUSA. He also, because of some problems the WUSA ended up being hands-on with at least one team for when people were either let go or fired or something else. So he was very involved in the WUSA for those 3 years. He had a period of time where he sat on the USSF board of directors and has done some stuff also back in the business world. But now he is, at least, I don't know today if things have changed, but back when he, like they always do with the players, once they know who's won the vote and going to be inducted, they usually do the video and surprise the players. So as of last August, when he got notified that he was going to be inducted, he was back with his boyhood club, Ballistic United, back in Pleasanton, as the technical director. So it kind of come full circle. And one of the things I always enjoyed about Kevin Crowe, and again, as someone who's a few years younger than he is, but played soccer and went to soccer's matches, and especially at that time, they were in on the news, they were in the newspaper all the time. You read quotes, and Kevin Crowe always came off as a very level-headed person who also put the team above everything, especially any individual awards, and would frequently have comments like, be appreciative that he was recognized as Defender of the Year, but always put it on his teammates and the goalkeeper and everything else. It's like this is, it may have come to me, but this is a team award. And I think that was always something that made me hold Kevin Crowe in high regard, and was always one of my favorite players when I would go watch the Sockers when I was much younger than I am now. Kevin Crowe has, this induction into the National Soccer Hall of Fame, I believe, is his 7th Hall of Fame he's been inducted into. He's been inducted into his youth club's Hall of Fame, Ballistic United, to his high school's Hall of Fame, Amador Valley High School. Cal North State Association has inducted him into their Hall of Fame. He has been inducted into the Aztec Hall of Fame. That was in 1989, and he was the first soccer player ever to be inducted into the Aztec Hall of Fame. In 2011, he was inducted into the Indoor Soccer Hall of Fame. He was part of the inaugural class of players because they just started up the Hall of Fame for indoor/arena soccer, and that was their first class in 2011. So Kevin Crowe was part of that, along with some fellow Sockers. Quite some of the names we've discussed on this podcast already. Some we'll discuss on future podcasts. But Coach Ron Newman got inducted with that 2011 class. Steve Jungle, Julie V, Bronco Segoda, which is a great goal scorer for the Sockers, and one of their goalkeepers, Victor Noguera, was also inducted in that inaugural class along with Kevin Crowe. And now he's being inducted into the National Soccer Hall of Fame, as we're talking about, as part of the veteran class, along with Tony Sana. Those were the two that made it in for veterans as part of this 2026 class. There is one place he's not that he really ought to be, especially in terms of San Diego. In San Diego, we have the Breitbart Hall of Fame, where we recognize the best athletes that have come through San Diego, played for San Diego teams, played for San Diego colleges, or grew up here. Julie V is in that. He was the first soccer player to be inducted into the Breitbart Hall of Fame. But Kevin Crowe is not part of the Breitbart Hall of Fame, and I really think that's something that needs to change. If he's in the National Soccer Hall of Fame, he really ought to be in the San Diego Breitbart Hall of Fame. But that's my pitch to get him into the Breitbart Hall of Fame here. Before we wrap things up with Kevin Crowe, Dylan, do you have any comments or thoughts?
No, I just that last thing is honestly pretty absurd. Somehow rises to the standard of National Hall of Fame, but our local Hall of Fame has decided otherwise. I mean, all I got. It's just silly, I guess. Is all. I don't know. It's just kind of funny.
Well, I don't, just like the Aztec Hall of Fame does all sports, right? That's
Right.
not just a soccer Hall of Fame, and same with the Breitbart. It's not a soccer Hall of Fame; it's all sports. But Kevin Crowe not being in the Breitbart Hall of Fame is a miss. It is a clear miss. He really ought to be in there. Some of the things we mentioned about his character a little bit, but I think we'll kind of wrap up with this. And I was not aware of this. I read this, I believe, in the Mike Lewis profile that is on the National Hall of Fame page where they do the biographies and profiles of the people who get inducted. And in this, it was, and I'm going to be paraphrasing here, but it was about, I think they interviewed his high school coach. And in the final game of his, I don't know if it was his senior year high school season or not, but it said in the final game of the high school season, Crowe, who started his career as a forward, and it's one of the things he thought made him a great defender, is he spent so much time learning how to be a good forward, knowing which runs to make, being a good goal scorer, that when he moved to defender, which happened in college, George Logan moved him to defender, he felt he could stay one step ahead of the attackers all the time because he knew exactly what they wanted to do, and it was much easier for him than to read the pass or the play and make a step at the right moment to disrupt a pass or disrupt the person as they were getting the ball. But in this final game of the season, he gets tripped, draws a penalty kick. He's on the verge of breaking the school scoring record. And instead of taking the penalty kick as the star player, he passed off the opportunity to another player from the team who had been in a slump for about a month. And I remember reading they asked Kevin Crowe about this. He goes, again, this is one of these things he talks about. It's a team sport. Individual awards are nice, but it's really more about the team. And he made a comment out that the player was struggling. Like, it doesn't matter whether I break this record or not. I mean, that really makes no difference. But it's more important to help my fellow player here try to get out of their slump, so they will do better moving forward in the games, which I'm only assuming are going to be possibly the upcoming playoff games or something. So he did. He passed it along, and that was something that stuck certainly with his high school coach at the time. And again, I think really embodies the type of player that Kevin Crowe was his entire career, of really putting the team first and accepting and, honored to be recognized, but it was really more about the team than it was about any individual. And that's our overview of Kevin Crowe and his history, and hopefully, especially with some of the national team experience, or maybe the possible almost signing with Manchester United, gave some people a little more insight into Kevin Crowe's full career, other than just a great player with the San Diego Sockers. All right, Dylan, any final thoughts on Kevin Crowe before we kind of start to wrap things up here?
No, just that was pretty interesting. I like I said, I learned a lot.
All right, well then, now that we've wrapped up this topic, maybe we should look at the answer to our trivia question. So let's bring up the question one more time. Our question was, 3 Soccers were part of the 1984 U.S. men's Olympic soccer team. Can you name all 3? Now, we obviously mentioned in part of the episode there that Kevin Crowe played on that team, so we know Kevin Crowe is one of them. I don't know how much it'll help because we've mentioned quite a few names in this podcast, but the other 2 players have already been named in this podcast. You want to take a stab at them? I know it's probably just going to be a shot in the dark for you, but
I'm pretty sure. I think it was Perez was also one of the Hall of Fame members. So I'm gonna
he
go with
was.
that.
Hugo Perez is
Yes.
correct. He was one of the players on the 84 team. I'm not sure you'll get the other one.
No,
we'll
I have
give
no.
you a shot.
I'm looking at it now. I have no idea.
Okay. Yeah, Gene Wilrich was the other player who was part of that 1984 U.S. men's Olympic team. Again, another great player with the San Diego Sockers. I believe, if I remember correctly, has also been inducted into the Indoor Soccer Hall of Fame. But yeah, he was, I think, had a goal at the Olympics as well. I think. I don't know. I have to go back and double check that. But those were the 3 Soccers players at the time that were part of the 1984 Olympic team. It's funny when you look at that Olympic team and you look at, the rosters and what teams they came from. It's all indoor teams. And maybe, well, I guess not in 84. I was thinking a little later. I was thinking of the 85 World Cup qualifier. But when you look at that roster, it's all indoor teams. In 84, it would have been some NASL teams because that would have been the final year of the NASL season that summer. Okay, that was our trivia question for the episode. But we need to do, well, we'll do our trivia question that we'll leave you with here in just a second. But just a reminder, we're here usually doing our live show Tuesdays at 6 o'clock here on our YouTube channel. So feel free to join us live, or you can always watch it at your convenience. But jump in on our community page as well, and you get a chance to answer the trivia question, which we're going to leave you with one here in just a second. Because next week's episode is going to be about Ferenc Puskás. Now, most people are probably familiar with the Puskás Award that's given out to, I think as it's really technically phrased, the most beautiful goal scored for a calendar year. But we're going to dive a little deeper into Puskás and who he was as a player. Why is this award even being named after him? But that is also because, like we did the Pele episode when Pele came to San Diego, we're going to do one when Ferenc Puskás came to San Diego. So we'll do a little background on Puskás, and we will talk about when he was here in San Diego and why, again, in terms of a competitive match, like it was with Pele. And again, we'll do that next week. So here's the question, a little bit of background for Puskás. Worldwide, he is probably best known for his roughly 8 seasons that he had with Real Madrid. During that time, Real Madrid won 5 La Liga championships, 3 European Cups. He scored 242 goals in 262 matches, nearly a goal a match on average. So the question is, how old was Puskás when he joined Real Madrid? So we'll give the answer on next week's episode, but we'll talk a little bit as to why he joined when he did, and then what he did post career and why he was in San Diego in 1968. Dylan, any thoughts or comments before we head on out? Anything about Puskás or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, Ferenc Puskás is one of the most interesting historical football figures for me. He features pretty heavily in the book I've referenced probably a few times on this show, Inverting the Pyramid. He was really
Right.
kind of seminal player around which the game kind of materialized in that era, the 50s ish. And I think a lot of people don't realize, like, a lot of more modern football fans kind of balk when you say this to them, but like, Hungary is probably the best team to never win a World Cup. And I don't mean modern Hungary. I'm not talking about Dominic Szoboszlai, as good as he is, but like that Hungarian team in the 50s is probably the best team to never win a World Cup. And I think a lot of modern football fans just don't fully appreciate that. And then you also have the cultural aspect of Ferenc Puskás. Hungary coming out of the World Wars era was pretty divided. So he was a very nationalist figure for them too, for better or for worse at times. I'm sure he'd tell you that as well. But he's also one of those coaches. He's kind of like Marcelo Bielsa in the sense that he's your favorite coach's favorite coach. And my favorite example of this I always like to give in Ange Postecoglou's time playing at South Melbourne Hellas, one of his coaches was Ferenc Puskás, and Ange will say that he maybe the biggest impact on his outlook of the game, and that really harkens back to that kind of 1950s more push and run, attacking freely style, right? So the guy has echoes of his influence in the game in modern senses that I think a lot of people don't fully appreciate.
Yeah, so we will dive a little bit of a history, just kind of like we did tonight with Kevin Crow, and like we'll do in some of our episodes. Yes, we're going to talk about why he was here in San Diego and the San Diego connection, but it gives us an opportunity to really dive in a little deeper on an important historical figure in the world of men's soccer. So we'll do that. So I had actually toyed with a trivia question, and maybe we'll do that mid episode, but I'll preview it here. But I was going to say, we know he's Hungarian. He played for the Hungarian national team, and then I was going to ask, do you know what other national team he played for? He actually played for another national team as well. So
is this
we may save that for.
Okay, I was going to say, because I have some guesses, but we're going to get into some historical geopolitics here, and I'm not sure if we have time for that.
Yeah, well, we may throw that in for our mid-episode trivia next time. But
sounds good.
Instead, for this one, and we'll put it up on our community page on the YouTube channel as well. The question is, how old was Puskás when he joined Real Madrid? Because I think that's an important part of this story as well, once we get to that. So like always, we'll answer that at the beginning of our next episode. So please send in your trivia questions. You can either email them to me at john@bigminddigital.com, or on our YouTube page in the community section, we always list the trivia question. You can answer them there, just like 619 Blade Guy did this last week. And I always, when I'm out and about, I'll have some people just, randomly, give me answers or try to get the correct answer out of me. But feel free to post them there on the YouTube channel so we can see everybody's answers, and we'll see who gets the correct answer for next week. All right, Dylan, any last thoughts before we're officially out of here?
No, looking forward to the Puskás discussion. I think that'll be a kind of fun peek into the past.
Yeah, so am I. Looking forward to it. All right, everyone. We will see you again next week. This has been This Week in San Diego Soccer History. And remember to go out and support San Diego soccer. Good night, everyone.